Well, it's a great day to be back at Out of the Main, John. It wasn't all that long ago that you and I were in this very podcasting booth positing whether lightning can strike twice. So my question for you today is, can fire fall twice?
And it has. It has. Yeah, we are honored to have back. I know Jock's already shaking his head at you, Tom, but we have the leader and founding member of one of my favorite bands, probably since I discovered them. The first track I heard was from your third album. When I heard Strange Way,
oh yeah,
I was caught for good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jock Bartley to the podcast.
Hello, gentlemen, and the listening audience.
Hello. Yeah, so it's great to have you back. John, I'm going to come back to Strange Way because I hear hints of it on this new record that you have coming out in September, Jock, which you sent us an advanced copy of. And as the kids might say, it goes hard. It's called Family and Friends. Tell us about the concept and
Friends and Family.
Sorry. Friends and Family.
I'm holding it up so you can see it. Only our YouTube audience can see that, though. Okay.
And by the way, that beautiful cover my son Jamie did. I'm a painter too, and Lynn, the record label, said, "Why don't you paint the cover, Jock?" And I went, and I asked my son to come up with something, and he came up with that in about a day. And also the CD art on
that's beautiful.
It's like he's really, really talented. So it's so great to be talking with you guys and on the verge of having a whole new album out.
Well, explain really quickly. You told us the first time around this cover looks like molten lava going over a cliff, and that is the meaning of your band name. If you can explain what Firefall is for those people that don't have the history and haven't heard you the first time around in this show.
Sure, I'll try not to take too long doing it. When Rick Roberts presented the name Firefall, nobody else in the band, the original band, 2 years before our first album hit, knew what Firefall was. But in the 1950s and into the 60s, actually, that's wrong. From the 1890s, but it got real big in the 50s and 60s. In Yosemite National Park in California, they would set off a bonfire on top of a cliff, and the guy with the megaphone down at the tourist, it was a tourist attraction. He would say, "Let the fire fall," and they slowly would have this plunger push off the bonfire, and it was like a lava molten deal, and it was just spectacular. They stopped it, about 25 years ago because of ecological reasons. But as a sidelight, forever, there's two Firefalls. The man-made one, which the picture that Jamie used was pretty much that. And then the natural one that there are 2 weeks in February every year where the setting sun in Yosemite catches Horsetail Falls, a waterfall, just right, and it illuminates it, and it looks like the Firefall, and it's so it's the natural one that happens twice a year, all the way back eons, and that's where the Firefall came from, and it's a really cool name because there's a lot of art that goes with that.
Yeah, the art for the new album fits right in line with some of the early artwork from your earlier records, so I love that. But tell us the concept behind this. How did this come to you, and what was it like pulling this all together? Because it's a very interesting concept, the Friends and Family.
Ooh, boy, there's 3 questions right there. The concept is really fantastic. Our manager, Lynn Fico, about a year and a half ago, when Mark Andes, the bass player, was still in the band, we had a conference call, and Lynn said, the original members of Firefall, many of them, played in other famous bands like, the Byrds, the Flying Breeder Brothers, Spirit, Heart, Dan Fogelberg, in my case, Graham Parsons. Why don't you guys make an album of just their songs? And the concept really sounded great to me. The light bulb went on, and I said, Lynn, how about we expand your idea, which is great, by the way. And in 1976, when our first album hit really big with You Are the Woman and Livin' Ain't Livin' and just the whole Firefall sound, which was pretty darn unique, actually, I said, we toured with some of the best bands of the day, and let's do a song from some of those that included the Doobie Brothers, Fleetwood Mac, Loggins and Messina, Leonard Skinner before the plane crash, Marshall Tucker. We got to tour with a lot of the best bands in the industry right out of the box. Amazing. And he said, that's great. So the concept is, in Firefall's history, which started in 1974 in Boulder, Colorado, and then got national and international in 1976 when our first album hit so big, you know, the main thing about Firefall has always been the songs. And as the lead guitar player, it's like there's, you know, thousands and thousands of great lead guitar players out there, but the songs and the singers are what made Firefall, and also what made the Eagles, and what made, you know, I mean, it's always the song. And, you know, and then we had a chemistry with the original band, which was Rick Roberts and Larry Burnett, the original singer-songwriters, me on lead guitar, Mark Andes from Spirit and JoJo Gunn on bass, Michael Clark from the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers on drums, and the late great David Muse, who unfortunately died last year from cancer. We had a magic going to us, but so the sound of those people playing in the studio together was really magical. But the number one thing is the songs, always the songs. And on this album, once the concept got formalized, I realized that we had some of the very best rock and roll songs from the late 60s and 1970s to choose from. And I knew immediately that that was going to have a lot of responsibility to it, too. Like, for instance, Lynn, when he said, you guys used to tour with the band? Oh, my God. You know, and Levon Helm and Robbie Robertson. And those two first band albums are two of the best American albums ever made, I think. You know, he said, yeah, God, the band, you guys can do up on Cripple Creek. And I went, no friggin' way. You know, the only person who should ever sing that song really is Levon Helm, right? You know, so we had to be real careful about the selection of songs. And the current Firefall lineup is myself, Steve Weinmeister, who was in the band for 25 years and then left for 5 years and now is back. Great singer, guitar player. Our newest member is John Bisaha, a killer, absolutely killer lead vocalist and bass player. And for me, as the producer and the third guy in the blend here, you know, on the low part, to have those two guys be able to sing so great on this album, unbelievable. And Sandy Fick on drums and Jim Waddell, great sax flute keyboard player who replaced David Muse as his health got worse and then unfortunately died. The new band, you know, like, for instance, I didn't know what Heart song to play. Mm-hmm. And really, the reason we're doing a Heart song is we got to be really good friends with him. And also, Mark Andes was in Heart for most of the 80s, you know, and Mark retired. He got tired of being on the road and really just got sick of the whole thing and retired like 2 months before we're supposed to start making this record, which I freaked out and went, oh, my God. And then John Bisaha came into the picture, and suddenly the vocals in Firefall took a quantum leap forward. You know, so first of all, I knew that any Doobie Brothers song we would pick, tens of thousands of Doobie Brother fans would probably hate it because how dare that band record my favorite song, you know? And we had to, you know, there was a lot of songs, you know, that I would not even consider doing, you know. But for instance, on the Heart song, I didn't, you know, it's the Wilson sisters, you know, and Barracuda would be totally out of the question. No, you know, there's a lot of songs that on Heart I wouldn't have wanted to re-record. And by the way, let me just say, that we did this recording with huge respect and love for those bands and the songs and the 70s that we all were in, you know. And, you know, I said to the band, I have no idea what heart song to pick. And John thought about it for about 3 seconds and said, I could sing the crap out of What About Love? And I went, really? He says, yeah, give me a shot at that. I went, done. You know, and that's kind of how we picked the Doobie Brothers song too, because, you know, we got to know and tour with the Michael McDonald Skunk Baxter Doobie Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that occasionally on the road would have the Memphis Horns with them. Oh my. But I didn't know. And John pretty much said again, I'd love to give a shot to Long Train Running, you know. And if you'll notice, there's 2 guitar parts on the original Doobie Brothers song of that. I kind of took the second one and made it the main part and put the other one in there as little candy because, you know, we had to be really careful. And the truth is, like, for instance, on the Dan Fogelberg song, Part of the Plan, even if we did it just like Dan's record, you know, it wouldn't sound like that because it'd be different vocals, different studio, different time, all that kind of stuff. And frankly, the Dan Fogelberg song is very much like the record, his record, with love and respect to the late, great Dan Fogelberg. But on the Doobie Brothers song, I kind of let it, as producer, go a ways, you know. And then when we added the saxophone to that, it was like, yeah.
Yes.
So,
you know what's funny about that?
Having a bunch of the songs be just like what, you know, we were honoring, you know, the original versions. And then I liked taking the songs a kind of a different place. But the bottom line again, it was the songs. And for me, you know, these are, you know, 13 of some of the best songs of the 60s and 70s.
Let's start with Long Train Running, if you don't mind, because when John got the advanced copy of the CD first, he was coming over to my house and he's like, you're not going to believe how this record opens, because rewind the Wayback Machine till about, 11 months ago, we happened to be talking about that song. And I said, you know, it's the first time I really listened to that song on headphones. And I've always been so infatuated with the rhythm guitar part because it's so iconic and memorable. I never realized there's this little plucky part going on the left side, you know, in my left ear.
Right.
Infectious, and I can't unhear it now. And then you lead the entire record off with this.
With the part that hardly anybody ever heard.
Yeah, and it's a rock and roll.
But
and
Tom can't live without it now.
I can't live without it. And then the sax comes in, and I'm like, right away, right out of the gate, I'm like, I'm in love with this record.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I'll tell you,
I'm really happy to hear that because, you know, we're on a record label, and our manager / label picked for the first single, and the song that they were going to push and was by far the best was the Doobie Brothers song.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I thought, are you sure? And they were going to put that out as the first single. And then a few weeks, couple of months ago, they decided, no, let's put Leonard Skinner out just as a teaser. Yeah. And then we'll put the Doobie Brothers song out right when the record comes out, and everybody's going to love it. You know, I really, you know, I'm really glad to hear you guys say that about the Doobie Brothers song, because I'm still just a little 5% unsure about that. I'm not unsure about a lot of the other songs that we did, you know, and the record is just so strong. But going back to the song thing, we had our pick of songs, you know, and it's, you know, it's just really fantastic to be able to honor the late 60s and 70s by doing our friends' songs.
The sax thing that you bring in on the Long Train Running is what's going to set it apart and say, oh, well, they're not just doing a rehash of the Doobie Brothers. You have musically intended to do something more with it. And I do love how on this record it is, as you said, a mix of some of these we're going to do them like the record and nod to the original, and others we're going to do complete reinventions. And the one that really caught my attention, more as a personal inside joke to me, is when you did Poco's Heart of the Night, because way back in the day when that first came out and I'm like a teenager or something, I thought that was a Firefall tune to begin with. So I love the fact that you picked that tune. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that we didn't really tour or get to know Poco until like the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And when we toured with them all the time, it was Poco, Firefall, and Pure Prairie League. It was like that was it.
Wow, hot
us,
bill.
Yeah, 50% of our touring days was like that because we had the same manager in Nashville, and and I got to be really good friends with Rusty Young and Paul Cotton, and Poco is a band that didn't quite get their due, and I hope they do get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When we, the obvious choice for us was Paul Cotton's In the Heart of the Night, and of course Firefall doesn't have a pedal steel player like Rusty in the band, and I kind of thought it was interesting, guys. Some songs like World Turning by Fleetwood Mac that we did, I really studied Lindsay's guitar parts. And I'm going, oh my God, that's great. On other songs on Poco, I didn't even listen to the record. I knew the line. We were really good friends for 30 years with Poco. And I figured, I can play slide guitar and kind of sound like Rusty, and then there's the sax. I don't even know. You could probably tell me on In the Heart of the Night, the original studio version of theirs, was there even a saxophone, or did that come on the live versions that they made a single out of?
I associate it with the studio version. Tom?
Yes.
You?
Yep.
Yeah,
and we should probably even know who the sax player is, but we don't have our Yacht Rock personnel cred, I guess.
So the original in the studio did have sax on it too.
Yes. I do believe so. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. It was so much, and the love was coming out when we were recording that, and I wanted to make sure that the sax, the slide guitar of mine and Jim's great sax work on that song. And, Jim plays, he sounds like, Dave Sanborn to me sometimes. It's just, when you got a great sax player going, hey, take all night. You're playing great. It was really cool doing that song. And Steve Weinmeister sang the vocal on it. And, that doesn't sound like the original, but it's interesting that you said that when you first heard the song, you thought it might be a Firefall song.
Yeah, and that would have been radio days, and I was young and no internet to look it up. And if they don't back announce the song, you don't know who it is. You know?
Well, one thing I wanted to point out, sorry, John, real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
This will maybe hopefully further allay your fears, Jock. I felt like every version of the song was not only a great rendition of it, it was a Firefall rendition of it. And I want to go back to how What About Love opens. And tell me, John, if this isn't reminiscent of Strange Way.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Now that you say it.
Again, now, when you're in the studio recording a song of my own or Rick Roberts or whatever, you're creating something that's never been before. Like, for instance, when we did You Are the Woman, it kind of stuck out because it was really poppy and white bread and everything. And then there was all these other Mexico Cinderella, kind of songs, the Firefalls and stuff. With this song, I didn't really know. Once we figured, okay, what about love? And John had to have it in a lower key than Ann Wilson sang it in. And, when we started, so I made the acoustic guitar parts in a click track first. Some of this album was done long distance on email. And when we finally got Steve and John in the studio to sing together, because he lives in Nashville and three of us are in Colorado. They're also the two really good bass players in the band. Steve plays great bass and John's our new bassist. And John said, I'm playing this part that's kind of like Strange Way because this feels like Strange Way to me. So as soon as he said that, we played it up.
Yeah.
And I said, Jim, we need a flute. We need flute in this. And we need, and we created that to be the one that really sounded like 1978 Firefall.
John, I'll let you go next, but I just wanted to say, what a nice touch to add the female harmony, though, because you missed the Wilson sisters, right? Or you could potentially miss it. But just adding a single female voice in that harmony and just pay such homage to the original. I just loved it, John.
Well, not to just talk about John Bisaha, but his wife, Holly, That's Holly Basaha, and she's in the Babies with John. She's one of the two female singers in the Babies now. And, the Babies only play like 5 or 6 or 7 gigs a year. So, John's got that going, but we got a new album and he's singing Simple Man, and, it's really great. But I agree with you. I knew I wanted to have at least one, if not a bunch of girls on that. And I just thought, John's got his own thing. I just sent him the track, and they did the harmony vocals and sent him back. And it was like, wow,
yeah,
this sounds great.
Well, my question, I'm looking through the credits of this, and you've got, as you mentioned, everybody, what they play, but you have something on your list of credits that I kind of wanted to dig down and see if you could explain. You have something on your list called high-strung guitars. Now, I'm familiar with a Nashville strung guitar. Is that what you're talking about, or is there something? Can you briefly explain what that means?
I hope it's not a typo. It's supposed to be high-string.
High string, yeah. Well, high strung would be maybe
that's after 3 cups of coffee.
High string guitars, yeah.
And I think they use this in Nashville a lot, but I don't really know what it's called. I've always called it high string guitar, and I learned about it from somebody out in LA back in the 70s. And what it is, so a 12-string guitar has 6 of the regular guitar strings, and then octaves above the strings until you get to the top 2. And so what this is, the high string guitar is an acoustic guitar strung with the high strings of a 12-string guitar. So you got the first 2 like that, and then you got the high G, high D, high A, high E, an octave above where a real guitar sounds like.
Yeah, that's what somebody called a Nashville guitar to me, but they weren't from Nashville. The person that told me that weren't from Nashville either, but that's what I learned as a Nashville strung acoustic.
Oh, really? Okay, good. Nashville strung acoustic.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, no, I get that totally, but it's interesting because if you strum or have a little picking pattern on an E minor chord on a regular guitar, you finish that, you make a track out of it, and there it is, right there.
Mm-hmm.
You play the exact same thing on a high string guitar, and it opens it up and it adds this new deal to it that's unbelievable.
Then split them left and right in the mix, and you have what amounts to a stereo 12-string guitar sound.
Right, with only the 6 bottom strings there
are on one side,
top strings over there. Yeah,
right.
So it's really great. And you know what? I've done songs where I simulated a 12-string with the high string guitar on a certain part playing whatever it is.
That's cool.
And frankly, I didn't do that on our Bird song, Feel a Whole Lot Better. I asked my friend John Jorgensen, who's one of the best guitar players in the planet, if he'd play Ricky 12 on that. And he said, sure. So he played the Roger McGuinn stuff on the Bird song we did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, back to the Heart song. It was so great. And I didn't mention real quickly in the Heart song, I got to know Howard Leese from Heart way back in the early, mid 70s when we toured with them all the time. And he also played the last 6 or 8 years with Bad Company and Paul Rogers, and I asked Howard, and John Bisaha, our new singer, was in Howard Leese's, what did they call it? Rock Vault in Vegas, where it was about, 6 or 8 name rock people playing all the hits they used to play. So John and Howard were good friends too. I asked Howard not only if he wanted to put power guitar on the Heart song in the choruses, distorted Marshall guitars. I asked him if he wanted to play the solo. And he said, I'd be honored. And then he listened to our version. He said, but you changed the chords a little bit, so I can't play the same solo. And I said, you played a brilliant solo on the original 80s Heart song. I said, I don't want that same solo. Play something new. Let's go.
And did he ever?
So actually, that's Howard. And what was interesting, just as a little sidelight, he gave me the Crunch guitars. He emailed them back to me. But the solo he played, which was really good, and it was the one that was used, was on this clean, direct sounding guitar that had no sustain. And I went, what? You've been playing with Bad Company the last year. Let's hear some power here. I need some power guitar, you know? And so what happened was his engineer out in LA printed all the reverb and echo on the clean guitar. So when we took, here's some studio lore for your listeners.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got Howard's clean guitar on one track, track 21. On 22, we added an amp simulator that you can go in and say, let's play through a Marshall. No, how about a Fender Twin? Oh, no, how about a Seymour Duncan? You know, you can make a clean guitar sound like a dirty guitar and, a sustaining guitar. But the problem is because the echo and the reverb had been printed on the track, when we did that to the amp version, it was too much. The echo was like, oh, crap, what am I going to do now? And then I realized that if I learned the solo verbatim and played it with my sound with no effects on it and no echo, and we put the three guitars together, there's plenty of echo and reverb. And so on that solo, there's a clean Howard guitar, there's a simulated dirty guitar of Howard's, and then there's one of me playing the same thing, and you put them together and make it sound like one guitar.
Wow, woo. That is some studio lore. Woo.
Yeah, baby.
Nice. Inside baseball, inside rock and roll.
Inside baseball.
As long as we are pouring through the liner notes, I got to mention two names. Both gentlemen have been on the podcast twice. Two of our favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
Tristan Imboden and Lance Hoppen from Orleans collaborate with you on the track that is out now, which you mentioned, but it's the only song currently in August 2023 that you could hear, unless you have the disc, the advanced CD, and that is the Lynyrd Skynyrd tune "Simple Man." So tell us why you brought those cats in, other than they're just awesome players and awesome people.
Well, they're awesome players and they're awesome people.
That's it.
And I wanted to have some guest stars on this record. And I knew I wanted Tris, who was in fire after he quit. He and George Hawkins quit. Kenny Loggins' band broke up, and we got Tris and George, one of the best rhythm sections in history, on one album of ours. And then George went and joined Mick Fleetwood.
Yeah, Clouds Across
Africa.
the Sun. It's a great one.
Yeah, and Tris was our drummer for about a year.
Yeah,
and made, I don't know, an album and a half or something with us. And I've told Tris, he's a good friend of mine. And then for people who don't know, he became Chicago's drummer for 25 or 30 years or something.
Right.
Tris is one of the really rare drummers who, on one hand, is totally precise. Can play with a metronome, is a metronome. Every fill and every, is really precise. But then at the same time, he's one of the loosest kind of, hey, and playing a groove as anybody I've ever played with. And, you play with a lot of drummers are really just groove guys, and they're not that precise, or they're really precise and they don't really have a really down and nasty groove. And Tris does. And I knew I wanted Tris to be one of my guest stars. And Sandy Ficca, our drummer, was totally cool with that. And Sandy played great on 10 or 11 tracks, I guess 11. And, so I emailed it to him, and Tris went in the studio. And in fact, he called me and he said, I was going to put my own drum slant on Simple Man, but anything I tried didn't really work. He said, I think I'm going to just play what the Lynyrd Skynyrd guy played. And I went, fine, it's great. And John sang the heck out of that song. And that and of course, we could have had one of our bass players play on Simple Man, but I had told Lance about the idea. And he said, when we were out on the road together sometime, I said, I should have you play on the record. He's going to be one of my guest stars. He said, great. Which song? I said, I don't know yet. And, Simple Man was the next to last song out of 13 songs we cut. In fact, the Leonard Skinner song and the Doobie Brothers song were the two last songs we cut.
Wow.
And before that, we didn't really know. I didn't know if we were going to do a Skinner song or not, but anyway, I asked Lance and he said, well, the original's really pretty busy. The bass player's all over the place. And I kind of like it. And I said, great, play your head, play whatever you feel like. Those guys are master musicians and have made many, many gold and platinum records and just are pros in the studio like I am. And, it was great having Tris. So they didn't play together. I emailed both of them, Tris in Florida and Lance in Nashville. And we put together that when I got it back and we put it into the studio mix in Boulder, Colorado, I went, oh boy. And then that's when you figure out there's not much else needed on this, on this record.
Yeah, that's funny because Tris joked that he still has not met Lance, even though he's played with them. I think twice now. He's on two different records. Somewhere else, Tris is on a record with Lance. I think that he never met.
Wow.
Tom,
not to take a total departure, but Lance Hoppen from Orleans, the bass player, he played quite a bit with Felix Cavalieri from the Rascals and the Young Rascals. And he was, and I went and saw them about 5 years ago in Denver when they played there. And, Lance and I are talking. And right after the show, Felix is toweling off and sitting there. And, the Rascals, I don't know how, if I'm older than you guys probably. The Rascals and the Young Rascals, some people thought they were bigger than the Beatles.
Yeah.
And, in New York and New Jersey, they were, and, God, the songs they had, from Good Lovin' On. And then, why can't I think of the summer song? Groovin', duh.
Yeah,
Groovin'.
yeah.
So anyway, the quick little story was, so I started talking to Felix and I knew I had to have an opening good line or else, he'd want to talk, shake my hand and get out of here, kid.
Yeah.
I told him that the first concert I ever went to in Manitou Springs, in Colorado Springs, was the Rascals, right when Good Lovin' came out at the City Auditorium. And I said, in fact, I saw you guys there twice, and, he smiled and I went, and he says, I remember those gigs. Then we talked about, I said, Felix, three of the biggest bands of the 60s had drummers that were just really simple, straightforward. Ringo and the Beatles, Charlie Watts and the Stones, and Michael Clarke from the Byrds. And then I said, and then there was Dino Danelli. And the Rascals drummer, Dino, oh my God, Dino was like the most amazing drummer ever, probably. But anyway, the reason I brought this story up was we were talking about Rascals were on Atlantic Records. Firefall was on Atlantic Records, about 10 years apart, probably. And I said, Firefall, we used to see Ahmed Erdogan all the time and drink sake, and it was really great. And we were Atlantic's darling for about 3 or 4 years until Foreigner came along. And he laughed and he said, the Rascals were Ahmed's little darling until Aretha Franklin came along.
Right. Yeah. Oh, we lost your phone.
Oh, my phone fell off.
Yeah.
So, Jack, if your ears were burning 2 weeks ago, we were on this very podcast talking about this interesting lick that you did at the end of Mexico, the recorded, studio version of Mexico. And, it's kind of during the play out, you're doing a lead and Mark Andes has this awesome bass fill kind of turn around.
Oh, right.
And then he repeats it. And then the second time you nail it right on, but harmonize. Remember that? So we were just loving it. And then John and I were wondering how planned out was that and how spontaneous was it? And then the broader question is the style. I've been listening to nothing but Firefall the last few days. You do a lot of harmonizing with yourself in the guitar, the 2-part,
right.
Wonder where that style came from. So I guess answer the first question first.
Wait, take all my questions. Go ahead.
Spontaneous?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I've told Rick Roberts this a number of times that I was born to play on his song Mexico. And as I may have told you guys before, I'll make this one a short story. I didn't know it at the time at Criteria Studios, but when I was recording what ended up being a one-take solo start to finish, my guitar hero, Eric Clapton, was watching me play from the control room.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And, you know, it was a good thing I didn't know he was there, because I wouldn't have been able to play anything. Mm-hmm. To your question, sir, Mark's lick was a spontaneous lick, and that he just played. We have since made that a part of the song live every night we play it. Da 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 da. You know, we do that at a certain point. I had really kind of studied Mexico before I went out to do the solo on that, and I knew where that was coming. And when I heard the first one, him play that, I had worked out, okay, the only thing I worked out about that song was that lick, you know, because everything else I was just playing off the top of my head and just going for it. Right. But when I heard Mark play that first one, I knew that, I don't know, but for instance, if he played the root in A, I knew that me starting my lick in C, which was the 5, you know, da 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 da, you know, that I'd play a harmony to it. So I've never in 40 some years been asked about that lick. So I sure appreciate it, you know. I sure appreciate it, Tom. But Mexico is one of those songs. Cinderella, Mexico, Strange Way. You know, there are some songs of ours that were so magical, and you know, at one point in the studio, you have to just go, "That's enough, no more."
Yeah, right. Yep.
Not one more thing. And I have to do that in a painting. I'll be going like this and go, hey, and if I keep going, I can't bring it back to where it was 5 minutes earlier. Right. You know, in the studio, you can say, hey, let's not play that new sax part, you know, or whatever. But in the studio, you got to know when to say, okay, that's it. And that's one of the reasons I really like our Friends and Family album. In my production of that is I kept it pretty sparse. We don't have a lot of extra guitars or vocals or strings or stuff doing things. I wanted those songs and our performance of them to stand up kind of by itself. So fairly simple production.
Be like the band, not the band, but as though the record is representing what your band sounds like at this time.
Right.
Well, you got to ask a question about the early stuff, Tom. So this might be too long for the podcast, but maybe it'll be bonus bonus content. Bonus content for the YouTube audience. Going back to the first album. In fact, I'm going to ask you about the first song on the first album. It's something that reoccurs a few times in your guitar playing throughout that album, but it's most noticeable on the first song. It doesn't matter, and you'll hit a note, a lot of long sustained notes, and then as it's sustaining, there's the fundamental, and then we hear this octave or even 2 octave, almost like harmonic feedback or something rising up each time. And I know there's pedals and things that can do that now, but back then there probably was not. Were you sitting right in front of your amp creating that whistling? How were you doing that?
What a great question, John.
Even better than mine.
What?
Better than my question about Mexico?
Mine's even more inside baseball.
No. This is great. And I'm asking questions that really nobody's ever asked me since the 70s, you know, as many thousands of interviews I've done. So I have a Fender Super Reverb amp with 4 10-inch speakers on it that back in the day, with my 58 Cherry Sunburst Les Paul, which until recently was worth more than my house, now is a vintage Les Paul. Those two things, my guitar and the amp, with my style of playing and the bone tone that I have in my fingers, there was a time, John, that I could hit pretty much any note on my fretboard and have it just go, ooh, and then I go, there it is. I don't have to move.
Wow.
And, you take 2 steps that way, right or left, and you lose that. And on stage, and I'm playing through a Rendell amp every night, and I have a monitor, and sometimes with my distortion pedals and, just doing what I do live, you can find that place between the monitor, which has got your guitar, and the amp, which is cranking, where you go, there it is. Don't move.
Resonance.
And when you can hold a note as long as you want to, indefinitely if you want to, that opens you up to just, stuff. So back to the specific of your question. I was probably standing pretty close to my Fender Super when I was playing that solo, but when the sustained note, which was from the tube amp to the guitar, the humbucking pickups in a guitar, when it was going like that, sometimes what happens is in about a second or 2 or 3, other harmonics just grow. And I don't have any control about what harmonics are. They could be, like you said, an octave up or 2 octaves up, or a harmonic of the 5th, or, you don't know what it's going to be, but when you got that, and I think it doesn't matter, is maybe along with Mexico, but my solo on that and on the ending of that, where I controlled the thing really well and then went into other licks and stuff, not only might that be one of my better and best solos ever, but that's the best example of my Les Paul with no pedal and my amp turned up to 8 or 9 or 10.
Wow. Cool. Wow. Magic.
And then at the end of that story, when we went down for our second album, before I started overdubbing solos for our Lunacy, it was called Tropical Nights at that point with other songs. But I went in the studio, and before I got in there to cut solos, we played a gig at Gusman Hall in Miami, and I blew my amp up. I was playing some of that stuff, and it just went, and it was smoking, and 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 I'm going, So Dallas Shue, our roadie and guitar tech at that time, who's been with U2 for the last 30 years, and is the Edge's right-hand man, and and makes records with Paul McCartney and Peter Gabriel and Jackson Brown and stuff. He's on the road with Joe Walsh and the Eagles. But when he was 19 years old, he was our guy. He tried to come up with, how can we get Jock sound back? Whoa! And he must have, in Miami in Criteria, after I blew my amp up, he must have brought in 20 different amps from local stores, the new Music Man amp, old Fenders. Hey, let's try a Marshall. I don't like Marshalls. Let's try, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't really find my sound anymore.
Yeah.
Because I blew my amp up. But then I got, so I've got it back. But yeah, so I had to try to recreate that however I could on the second and third album.
Wow.
Amazing. One of the,
Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to say that my takeaway, just more generally from my recent revisit through the entire catalog, is my listening recommendation would be to have people go through your entire your album, your discography with headphones, because I never realized how wide the mixes are. So you mentioned that high string guitar. There's something on the left and on the right that just opens up the entire mix, and it's it's 2 different players now, I know, but it sounded like, all right, how did they pan the guitar left and right? It sounds like it's one instrument.
Well, in our case, we, on our first album, recorded the acoustic guitars with Larry playing his part or Rick playing his part, and me adding any other additional part that anybody thought we needed. By the second and third record, I was kind of doing all the acoustic guitars. And sometimes, like on Just Remember I Love You, there's either 3 or 4 of me playing acoustic guitar, play the same thing over here on the right, left and right, and then let's put one in the middle. And there'd be 3 performances of the same thing. And that's how, at least on some of those records, how we got the acoustic guitars to sound so big.
Really big. Yeah. It's cool.
Because just one guitar, I mean, you can, and if you got a great engineer and a great producer and a great guitar and a great mic, and, you can make one guitar sound immense and just wonderful. But, we back in the 70s, we did a lot of doubling and tripling of stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what? When you asked that question, what came to mind was the Beatles records. They, on 4 tracks, George Martin and Jeff Emmerich, the main engineer for a lot of those Beatles records, and they only had 4 tracks to work with. So you might have the really great sounding guitar solo on this track on the right, but you've also got, some harmony vocals, or you've got the tambourine and harmony vocals, and the bass is over here. They had to make 4 tracks work. And if you listen to Beatles records and with headphones on, you just go, "Oh my God, that's amazing."
Yep.
Yeah. Back then they had to know how to record and how to think ahead more than the mix. It didn't happen at the mix stage as much as it happened during the recording and the planning stage.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. And then for this album, which you mentioned, you didn't want to overproduce it, but it doesn't sound stripped down. It sounds very full, sounds very polished, sounds very present. So awesome job. I had one last question about it, and you were the producer, so congrats as well.
Thanks. I'm really proud of it.
You should be. Sure. You do a rockin' version of a tune that I think can only be done rockin', and that is Angry Eyes by Loggins and Messina. So what's the friends or family connection to Loggins and Messina?
We toured with them a lot.
Okay.
We did their last tour. I think they broke up in 1976. I could be wrong. It could be 77. But I think, Kenny and Jim only made 2 albums, a live album or something. They were kind of a short-lived thing. And then suddenly it was Kenny Loggins, doing all of his Kenny Loggins stuff with Trish Imboden and George Hawkins, in the band. That was the natural, obvious choice to do from Loggins and Messina, and, it probably wasn't their big hit, and they had a couple of hits, Your Mama Don't Dance and, and all that kind of stuff. But that was so Firefall. And I mean, that one translates to us, really well. And Jim Waddell on saxophone just plays his tail off. And I had to edit the solos and the, stuff, because what's kind of funny, guys, was Jim started his sax solo either a measure early or a measure late. Now, that whole song's pretty much 3 chords, and, you can start anything anywhere. But, I kind of thought, well, all my guitar stuff was like, and we went to the double time where the high note was going to take over and the guitar would come in, and I had to do some cutting and pasting to make that work, because and I don't even think that the solo that we have on the record is a normal number of bars, 8 bars, 16, whatever.
Right.
I cut it to fit what we had on tape. And of course, tape, I'm a 70s guy. It's Pro Tools, and you say, "Hey, let's take that measure out," and then it's gone. All right. Hey, let's take that. I was going to say, let's take that drum fill from earlier in the song and put it here again.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem. Boom, you're there.
Yeah. Well, at least you say cut and paste. John likes to make fun of me when I say splice.
Yes.
Oh.
Splice. I used to do that. I had to splice tape back in the day. I know how to do it.
Splicing, splicing 3-inch tape, when you would say, "Hey, let's take 2, let's get to the chorus quicker and take that intro out again."
It scares me to death.
Engineer, I can remember distinctly, and you're going, and to get it at the right place. Oh man.
Oof.
Well, Jock, congratulations on a very well done album. Drops in September, mid-September. We do go out, and you can listen to the Leonard Skinner cover now, because that's on all streaming platforms. You have dates coming up, live dates, and my question then is, are you going to be doing these numbers during your live show?
The problem with that is when Firefall plays a show with 2 or 3 other bands, and we do a lot of packages with, Atlanta Rhythm Section, Firefall in Orleans, or Pure Prairie League and Firefall, and so it's like, and you're only given a 45-minute set. Now, on a 60 or 75 or 90-minute set, yes, we're going to play select songs from this record. But in a 45-minute set, and I've been doing kind of the same set, for the same set for 20 years. You know, it's like, I know which Firefall songs have to be on there because people want to hear You Are the Woman and Just Remember I Love You in a Strange Way in Mexico. And they want to hear, you know, and the cool thing about Firefall for me is that I keep a really tight rein on Just Remember I Love You and You Are the Woman and Strange Way until the solo has to sound like the record as much as we can make it sound like the record, because that's why people are paying money for their tickets. Oh, I love that song. You know, but we also, with songs like Mexico or the flute solo on Strange Way or Living Ain't Living for Me or something, we have total freedom to go in new places when the solos are happening or the interaction between the players. You know, it's really cool. And Firefall does have a lot of dates coming up, and in the fall and winter. In fact, I had to tell my agent, look, a couple of years ago, you had us go to Green Bay, Wisconsin for 3 years in a row in January. You know, and it's like, I love Green Bay, but you know, how about another month than that?
Yeah,
let's try August. And you know, so anyway, the new album we're really proud of. Let me say that if anybody wants to pre-order it, you know, you can go to Amazon and pay the money. And I've heard that you would get your album sent a couple of weeks before it is actually released in September.
Ooh, there you go.
But I'm chomping at the bit. You know, I want people to hear how good this record is. And I've got a scoop for you, Tom and John.
Ooh, I like that.
I got a scoop. I better scoot in a little bit here.
Yeah, we're not reporters, but we take scoops. Go ahead.
Okay. We're starting Friends and Family 2 now.
Oh,
all right.
And just to give you a teaser, you know, we had So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star by the Byrds ready for this album, but I kind of didn't want to do 2 Byrd songs. I only wanted to do one. So we have that one to be on this new record. And the 2 songs that I've already started working on are Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac.
Nice.
And Love the One You're With by Stephen Stills.
Very nice. Ooh,
you know, and we're going to pick a Beach Boys song, and we're going to pick maybe another Doobie Brothers song, or, you know, it's so great. And this album, I want to put 2 or 3 new Firefall songs on there just as a bonus or something, because some people go, oh man, you know, I hate cover albums, you know. It's like, but like you guys said earlier, I think we treated each one of these songs with respect and love, and it comes across.
And it's an interesting concept, so that makes it worth it. Because as I'm listening, I'm like, geez, I wonder. I'm trying to picture you, you know, sharing the stage with the Doobie Brothers back in the '70s or something. I'm like, God, I wish I could go back in time and be there.
Okay.
So, well, thank you for being here, Jock, again for the second time. Come back anytime. Certainly when version 2 is ready to.
How about tomorrow? Tomorrow at noon. Okay.
All right. Well, noon your time or our time?
Okay. But thanks for the invitation, and really nice talking to you guys again. And the brothers in Detroit. Yay.
Yeah.
Yep. The Motown Mutts or something.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Jock. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. We see you again.
Cool.
Her, because thank you. And I have to compliment you guys for, I mean, I got asked 3 or 4 or 5 questions that in, you know, 45 or 6 years, I've never been asked before. So
good.
That made me think a little bit.
Good.
Yeah. We get pretty nerdy on details. So
a lot of
I'll tell you what,
I just want to know. It's not always because I think the audience cares. I wanted to know every time I listen to that first album, I hear that whistling coming. I'm like, how is he doing that? So I appreciate you giving us.
You know, that's the question that stands out to me, because, you know, a normal listener to an album or a song on the radio who's never been in a studio and doesn't know anything about making records just listens to the guitar solo or listens to the vocals, you know. I remember after the Bee Gees left Criteria Studio, they started their own studio, and I got invited over to a session one time, and there were 3 24-track machines running together, and one of them, there was like 20 tracks of Barry singing the same thing,
and
20 tracks of Maurice, and, you know, and I'd never seen 4 24-track machines working together like that before, you know, and, you know, and as an artist, you know, the only thing that matters is what it sounds like at the end, you know. And, you know, if everybody thought I just played one, or somebody just played one great sounding acoustic guitar and just remember I love you, it's like, great. That's fine. That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, that lead guitar stuff, I'm one of the few people who can do that or does that. And I love it when it happens spontaneously on stage, because like I said, you stand in the right place and go, oh, there it is. That's it.
And the tone is in your hands. So like you mentioned, your bones are part of that resonance. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, we'll talk again soon, my guys.
All right, Jock. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
See you guys.
See ya.